Hi, welcome to all of you. This is Ashutosh Bajpai, and I'm back this time with a polity video. Under this session, I'll be discussing about the Indian polity and the basics of the Indian polity, the framing of the constitutions and the constituent assembly, how a constitution makeover uh, formed the constitution, and about the debates, what happened there, fundamental rights, president, judiciary, everything. Okay, so let's begin from here. Constituent Assembly, the making of the Constitution. The idea of the Constituent Assembly for India was put forward for the first time by a great person, Mr. M.N. Roy. Who was he? He was a pioneer of the communist movement in India. So here is the question exactly: what was before 1934? So there was no constitution in India. There were, you can say that a kingdom, Britishers were ruling, and before that, as we all know, the uh, Mughals were ruling there. So there were no constitution. India was not a democratic country at that particular time. There were dynasties and there were kingdoms were there. So it was the first time in 1934 when somebody raised voice for the Constituent Assembly, and I think he was the great person, Mr. Aman Roy, who saw a dream for the present India, exactly what is happening nowadays, Parliament and all. So I'll discuss more about it. So in 1935, what happened? Indian National Congress. It was the only party present there in India. So in 1935, Indian National Congress officially demanded a constituent assembly. And one more thing, they were added by the Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru in 1938, because there were a lot of confusions in the mind of the citizens. Because if there will be a constituent assembly, a constituent assembly, then who will be rule? Who will be ruling and who will be making the rules for the Indians? So it was a big question. So Jawaharlal Nehru clarified everything and he demanded the free constitution. He said that there will be no outside interference. Means he said that the constitution of free India must be framed without any outside interference. And what happened after that? The finally demand of the Constituent Assembly was accepted by the British government in under the August offer of 1940-1942. And then for the further proceeding, Sir Stanford Cripps, under the Cripps mission, came to the India with the draft proposal and said that the Indian Constitution to be adopted after World War II. So what happened? Go further. So, what happened after that when Sir Stafford Cripps came to India and said that the constitutions of the India to be adopted after the World War II? The Cripps proposal was rejected by the Muslim leagues, and it was headed by the Mr. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, as we all read about it. He was demanding for the separate constitution, and which was India to be divided into two autonomous states with the two separate constituent assemblies. One is for India and another one is for the Pakistan. So, finally, when Cripps mission was rejected, a cabinet mission was sent to the India. But what happened with the cabinet mission exactly? Cabinet mission rejected the idea of two constituent assemblies. It put forth a scheme for the constituent assembly which more or less satisfied the Muslim leagues. I still there was a problem. Mr. Jinnah was not agree with this. So what happened after that? The Constituent Assembly was constituted finally in November 1946 under the scheme formulated by the Cabinet Mission Plan. The feature of this scheme were like he was in against. Mr. Muhammad Ali Jinnah was in against, but still this was the decision of the cabinet mission, like there should be a constituent assembly, and that was the constituent assembly, and it was formed in November 1946. See, remember, dates must be there. Dates are very important, so you have to remember the dates. November 1946, this is a very important date. So what is the next? The total list of the Constituent Assembly was to be 389. Like as per the cabinet mission, there should be a 389 seats. Of these, 296 seats were to be allotted to British India and 93 seats to the princely states. princely states like the kingdoms governed by the kings. There were kings, there were dynasties. So uh, 93 seats were reserved for them, and 4 seats, there were under forces 4 seats, and these 4 seats were reserved for the chief commissioner provinces. What were these chief commissioner provinces? I will discuss later on in this slide only. So what happened, each province and princely state or a group of the state in case of a small state were to be allotted seats in a proportion to their respective populations. Roughly, 1 seat was to be allotted for every million population. Very important fact is there. 1 seat was to be allotted for every million population. Seats allotted to each British provinces were to be divided among the three principal communities: first Muslim, Sikhs, and general, all except Muslims and Sikhs in proportion to their populations. This is a very important data. And the representation of each community were to be elected by member of the community in the provincial legislative assembly, and voting was to be by a method of the proportional representation by means of the single transferable votes. Means the voting system were adopted that was the single transferable votes. What does it mean, single transferable votes? Uh, I will say the example of the current president election, like single transferable vote. There will be suppose there are two candidates were there, or four candidates were there, so you have to vote for every individual by writing 1, 2, 3, and 4. The first priority vote to whom, and the second priority vote to who, and third priority vote to whom. And if anyone is rejected, their votes are distributed equally to the rest of the candidates. It was the system adopted for the voting. As per the previous slide, we discussed about the distribution of the seats. 292 seats for the British Indian provinces, and 93 seats for princely states, and 4 seats were allotted for the chief commissioner provinces. And here in the slide you can see there is the distribution of the seats. And I'm sorry, this is not distribution of seats, this is the result of the election. So what happened after that? Election to the Constituent Assembly were to be held in July and August, and it was held in July and August 1946. Indian National Congress won 208 seats, and Muslim League 73 seats. Unionist Party 1, Unionist Muslim 1, Unionist Scheduled Caste 1, Krishak Praja Party 1, Scheduled Caste Federation 1, Sikh Non-Congress 1, Communist Party 1, and Independent 8. Means in the other hands we can say Congress won 208, Muslim League 73, and rest 15 seats. Altogether was 296 seats. Okay, so this was the result of the first election that was held for the Constituent Assembly. Here is the community-wise representation in the Constituent Assembly, and the number of Hindus were 163, Muslims 80, Scheduled Caste 31, and Indian Christians 6, backward tribes 6, Sikhs 4, Anglo-Indians 3, Parsis 3. And this way, altogether there were number of 296. As we discussed in the previous slide, like there was the total number 296. After the general elections for the Constituent Assembly held its first meeting on December 9, 1946. And there were one interesting thing happened. Not interesting thing, we will say like it was expected, and everyone was aware about that, because from the day one, from the day of the cabinet mission, Muhammad Ali Jinnah was not in favor of the Constituent Assembly, was not in favor of one Constituent Assembly. He was always demanding for the two Constituent assemblies for two different nations. So just because of that, the Muslim League boycotted the meeting, because the meeting was only attended by the 211 members there. Dr. Sachidanand Sinha, the oldest member present in the House, were elected as the temporary president. Later on, Dr. Rajendra Prasad was elected as the president of the assembly. Similarly, both Mr. S.C. Mukherjee and V.T. Krishnamachari were elected as the vice president of the assembly. In other words, the assembly had two vice presidents, and its starting days, assembly had its two vice presidents. On December 13, 1946, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru moved the historic objective resolution in the assembly. It laid down the fundamentals and the philosophy of the constitutional structure. Okay, it read and it covered some were around 8 points. I'll go with only first, just for the confirmation, because these 8 points are not important exactly what was that, but the thing is important is the date. It's on December 13, 1946 was objective resolution moved the first time in the assembly. So he read on the first point, this constituent assembly declares its firm and solemn resolve to proclaim India as an independent sovereign republic and to draw up for her future governance a constitution. So it was the starting of the historic objective resolution. What happened after that? This resolution was unanimously adopted by the assembly on January 22nd, 1947. You may say that after the discussion of near about 39 days. And objective resolution had the influence the eventual shaping of the constitution through all its subsequent stages. And it was a modified form of the preamble of the present constitution. We'll discuss about the preamble later on, but here the thing is to remember that it was the modified version, modified form of the preamble of the present constitution. On December 13, 1946, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru moved the historic objective resolution in the assembly, and it laid down the fundamentals and the philosophy of the constitutional structure of India. This was a very, you can say that, a very important date, and even this date is really very important for all of the Indians. Objective resolution was moved on December 13, 1946, and this resolution was unanimously adopted by the assembly on January 22nd, 1947. Now here is the question of what was this objective resolution, what was under that resolution. So here I will discuss point by point what was exactly objective resolution. It read, this constituent assembly declares its firm and solemn resolve to proclaim India as an independent sovereign republic and to draw up for her future governance a constitution. Wherein the territories and now comprise British India, the territories that now form the Indian states, and such other parts of the India as are outside India, and the states as well as other territories as are willing to be constituted into the independent sovereign India, shall be a union of them all. And also said that like with their present boundaries or with such other as may be determined by the Constituent Assembly, and thereafter according to the law of the Constitution shall passes and retain the status of autonomous units together with residuary powers and exercise all powers and functions of the government and administrations, save and except such powers and functions are as vested in or assigned to the Union or as her inherent or implied in the Union or resulting therefrom. And also added a few more words, like wherein all power and authority of the sovereign independent India, its constituent parts and the organs of government are divided from the people. Means altogether we can say that there was something about the frame. The objective resolution was the foundation of the Indian Constitution, and this is what read by the Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. and whatever the points read by the Pandit Nehru were discussed in the assembly, and finally on January 22nd, 1947, uh, this was adopted. So here, why I didn't cover all the points of the objective resolution, because the points of the objective resolution is not important. The thing is important is the date, like when objective resolution was moved on, moved moved on to the Constituent Assembly, and when it was adopted by the Constituent Assembly, how many days discussion were there. So you can find out the discussion, because it was moved on 13th of December 1946 and adopted on January 22nd, 1947. So how many days were there, so you can count it up. Oh, this page is really very important, because here are some important facts and some important dates, like our national flag, the current national flag, as you can see on the picture, like our national flag adopted on July 22nd, 1947, and Constituent Assembly also ratified the India's membership of the Commonwealth in 1949, and Constituent Assembly adopted national anthem on January 24, 1950. Next point, it adopted the national song on January 24, 1950. Also, it also adopted, it referred to the Constituent Assembly, that Dr. Rajendra Prasad elected as the first president of India on January 24, 1950. Okay, so if there are two dates are different, and rest three are same, like January 24, 1950, national anthem was adopted. January 24, 1950, national song is Vande Mataram. Vande Mataram is adopted, and January 24, 1950, Dr. Rajendra Prasad was elected as the first president of India. Okay, here are some important facts about the Constituent Assembly. In all, the Constituent Assembly had 11 sessions over 2 years, 11 months and 18 days. The constitution makers had gone through the constitution of about 60 countries, and the draft constitution was considered for 114 days. This was the total time. Right, so this is the very important fact. And the next one is the total expenditure incurred on making the constitution amounted rupees, Indian rupees 64 lakh rupees. Point must be noted, 64 lakh rupees just to create the constitution of the India at that particular time, when in the time between 1947 till 1951. uh, that time 64 lakh rupees was not a small amount. Okay, and it was also not an easy task for the Indian government or Constituent Assembly. Next one is Constituent Assembly had its final session on January 24, 1950. Means Assembly had its final session on January 24, 1950, and but it didn't called off. It, however, did not end and continued as the Provisional Parliament of India from January 26, 1950 till the formation of new Parliament after the first general election in 1951 and 52. Here is the question, like who was working as the Parliament, you can say that who was the supreme authority when country got the independent until 1951. It was the Constituent Assembly. Constituent Assembly was working as the Provisional Parliament of the India. See, the Constituent Assembly appointed a number of committees to deal with the different tasks of the constitutions. So, out of these, 8 were, like, a lot of companies were there, but there are there are 8 important committees are there. So here is the names. We'll discuss. First one is Union Powers Committee, that was headed by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. And next, Union Constitution Committee, it was also headed by Pandit Nehru. Next one was Provincial Constitution Committee, headed by Sardar Patel. Drafting Committee, we cannot ignore this. Drafting Committee, this is very important. And that was headed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. And next one was Advisory Committee, was headed by Sardar Patel. As I told, altogether there were 8 committees formed, but I didn't mention because I have only mentioned these 5 committees. Reason these are the only important for the exam purpose, but here I will dictate, so you can make the notes. uh, there were also a committee, like fifth one was I'm sorry, sixth one was uh, oh, I think there is something going wrong. Advisory committee is the fifth one. Yep, advisory committee was headed by Sardar Patel, but this committee had had 5 subcategories. First one was fundamental rights subcommittee, that was headed by J.B. Kripalani, and second one was minorities subcommittee, that was headed by Mr. H.C. Mukherjee. Next one was northeast frontier, tribal areas and Assam excluded and partially excluded areas subcommittee, that was headed by Gopinath Bardoli. And fourth one was excluded and partially excluded areas other than those in Assam, and that committee was headed by A.B. Thakur. And last subcategory was northwest frontier tribal areas subcommittee. So these were the subcommittees. Now the main six was rules of proclaim committee. It was rules of procedure committee, that was headed by Dr. Rajan Prasad. And seventh, states committee, committee for negotiating with the states, that was also headed by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. And the last one, eighth, was steering committee. It was headed by Dr. Rajendra Prasad. So these were the 8 committees formed to deal with the Indian. Now, as I told you, there were 8 committees formed. I will not discuss about every individual, but here, yes, I will discuss about the important one, that is drafting committee. The drafting committee was set up on August 29, 1947. It was the committee that was entrusted with the task of preparing a draft of the new constitution, and it was headed by the great person, chairman of the drafting committee, as you can see in the picture, Baba Sahab Bhimrao Ambedkar, or Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, or the father of Indian Constitution, the great man of the India, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Why drafting committee? As I told earlier also, it was this committee that was entrusted with the task of preparing a draft of the new constitution. Right? This committee consisted of 7 members, and the members are Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, he was the chairman, N. Gopalaswamy Iyengar, and the third, Alladi Krishna Swamy Iyer, fourth, Dr. K.M. Munshi, fifth, Sayyid Muhammad Sadullah, sixth, N. Madhava Rao, seven, sixth, N. Madhava Rao. As I mentioned here, he replaced by Mr. B.L. Mittal. Why? Because he has resigned due to ill health. And the last, T.T. Krishnamachari. And after that, after some time, he replaced by D.P. Khetan, because who died in 1948. Again, here are some important facts about drafting committee. Drafting committee, as I told, it was chaired by Dr. Ambedkar, the great man. Drafting committee took less than 6 months time to prepare its draft. Less than 6 months time. In all, it sat only for 141 days. Like drafting committee's members were discussed only for 141 days to draft the complete constitution of India. Now next, Dr. Ambedkar introduced the final draft of the constitution on November 4, 1948, and it was the first reading also. It was the first reading of the Indian constitution. The assembly had general discussion on it for 5 days till November 9. Next point is the second reading clause by clause. It started on November 15, 1948 and ended on October 17, 1949. And the third and the final reading of the draft was started on November 1, 1949. And in this reading, Dr. Ambedkar moved a motion, and the motion was the constitution as settled by the assembly be passed. This was a very important date. Remember, on 1st of November 1949, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar moved the motion and said in that motion that the Constitution Assembly, as settled by the Assembly, the Constitution as settled by the Assembly, be passed. And after the discussion, the motion on draft constitution was declared passed on November 26, 1949 and received the signature of members and the president. Means, here again, important date, November 26, 1949, Indian Constitution got the signature of its first president, Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Right? And also Indian Constitution was signed by the member of the Constituent Assembly. At that day, out of a total 299 members of the Assembly, only 284 were actually present there. So Indian Constitution got the sign of the 284 members. This is also the date mentioned in the preamble as the date on which the people of India in the Constituent Assembly adopted, enacted and gave themselves this constitution. This date, November 26, 1949 is very important because, as I discussed in the last page, like the Constitution of the India as adopted on November 26, 1949 contained a preamble and 395 articles and 8 schedules. Date of the adoption of the Constitution of the India was November 26, 1949, and Indian Constitution was adopted with 395 articles and 8 schedules along with the preamble. Here is the next point. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the then law minister, piloted the draft constitution in the assembly. He is recognized as the father of the constitution and the chief architect of the Constitution of India, and also known as the modern Manu. Why this? He is famous because he was the then law minister first thing. He was the head of the drafting committee, and he was the only person there who had the knowledge of the law. You can say that he was the most talented person at that time. So that's why he is known as the modern Manu and the father of the Indian Constitution. Here is some important facts about Constituent Assembly. Elephant was adopted as the symbol, seal of the Constituent Assembly, as you can see in the corner of this page. This was the seal, and it was adopted by the Constituent Assembly. And Sir B.N. Rao was appointed as the constitutional advisor to the Constituent Assembly. Next, H.V.R. Iyengar was the secretary of the Constituent Assembly, and Mr. S.N. Mukherjee was the chief draftsman of the Constitution. This is very important. Mr. S.N. Mukherjee, his name is really very important, and his contribution also was very important because S.N. Mukherjee, he was the chief draftsman of the Constitution. And the next point, Prem Bihari Narayan Rayzada was the calligrapher. He was the person who had written the Constitution by hand of Indian Constitution. The original Constitution was handwritten by him. Who was he? Mr. Prem Bihari Narayan Rayzada. He had written the Indian Constitution by his own hand. And next point is the original version was beautified and decorated by an artist from Shantiniketan, and he was Mr. Nandlal Bose and Bewhar Ram Manohar Sinha. These two persons were there who beautified and decorated the Indian Constitution, the book of the Indian Constitution. And the last, calligraphy of the Hindi version was done by Vasant Krishna Vaidya and decorated by again Mr. Nandlal Bose. So if I'll say like this, these were the tools who were assembled together, and they all together given us a great book, that is a present Indian Constitution. Enforcement of the Constitution. As I told you, the Constitution of India was adopted by the Constituent Assembly, and the date was November 26, 1949. What happened after that? Some provisions of the Constitution pertaining to citizenship, elections, provisional parliament, temporary and transitional provisions, and short title contained in Articles 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 60, 324, Article 367, Article 379, 80, 388, 391, 392, and 393 came into force on November 26, 1949 itself. Right? So these were the parts who came in force on November 26, 1949 itself. What is this all about? 5, 6, 7 article? I'll let you know in the chapter of fundamental rights. Next point, remaining provisions, like apart from that, like remaining provisions came into the force on January 26, 1950. January 26, 1950. We all aware about this date. We celebrate January 26 as the Republic Day of India. Why is it so? January 26 was specifically chosen as the date of the commencement of the Constitution because of its historic importance. What was the historic importance? It was on this day in 1930 that Purna Swaraj Day was celebrated following the Lahore session, December 1929 of the Indian National Congress. Just because of the Purna Swaraj Day was celebrated on 26th of January. That's why a constitution maker and the great personalities of the India that time decided 26th of January as the enforcement of the Indian Constitution. Right? Here is the cutting of the Indian Express of the 27th of January 1950. India proclaimed sovereign democratic republic. So let's give the standing ovation because 26th of January 1950 was the very important date for all of the Indians. It was a proud moment, and just because of those constitution makers, just because of the Constituent Assembly, just because of these committees and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, today we are the democratic country and developing with the growth rate of 7.1 or 6.9% per annum. This is a really great moment. So I'll finish the video. Jai Hind. Thanks for watching. Thank you very much from bottom of my heart that you have given your precious time. And in case you have got any problem, any query, any question, then here is on the screen you can see there is my contact details, my contact number. You can WhatsApp me as well as you can mail me. So if you like this video, then please subscribe my channel and don't forget to hit the like button. Till the time, I would say goodbye. God bless you all. Jai Hind, Vande Mataram, Bharat Mata ki Jai. Bye bye.